There's a dead body in the tent. Outside, polar bears are circling. No ship, no radio, no way off the island. And the only living human here isn't a soldier or an explorer. She's a 23-year-old seamstress, here only for money for her sick son. On Wrangel Island, every man Ada Blackjack trusted would disappear into the ice or die beside her. Yet the one person nobody believed was a survivor was the only one who walked away alive. This is how she did it. Ada grew up in a poor Inupiat family in Alaska, where hunger, cold, and racism were normal. As a young woman, she married a local hunter who drank, beat her, and finally walked out after 2 of her 3 children had already died. Her last child, Bennett, was always sick. Ada couldn't afford his treatment, and under pressure she left him in a children's home, telling herself one thing: I will earn money and come back for him. She had no idea that this promise would send her to an island people usually never return from. In 1921, 4 young men arrived in Nome with a plan cooked up by famous Arctic explorer Vilhjalmur Stefansson. His idea was bold and reckless. Sail to Wrangel Island, live off the land, hunt seals and polar bears, trap foxes for fur, and quietly claim the island for his side. It was a tiny team, and only one name you need to remember now: Lauren Knight, the tough but already unhealthy veteran. They wanted a local Eskimo woman to cook, sew for clothing, and complete their romantic picture of Arctic life, assuming wrongly that this meant built-in survival skills. In reality, Ada was a shy seamstress from near town, terrified of bears in the sea, who had never hunted big game. But they offered good money and promised to pay enough to bring Bennett home. One winter, some cooking, a bit of sewing, and back to her son. That's what she thought. She said yes. The men thought they were hiring a cook. They were actually bringing the only survivor they'd ever have. In September 1921, a small ship dropped them on Wrangel Island. No trees, no village, just rock, ice, wind, and animals. They set up tents on the southeast coast. They had flour, rice, beans, some canned food, rifles, and traps. The plan was simple: hunt, trap foxes, get through the winter, and in summer 1922 a resupply ship would come. The first months felt like a rough adventure. The men hunted seals and birds and sometimes bears. They set fox traps and wrote notes in their journals. Ada cooked whatever they brought in. She mended their clothes, patched the tents, stayed mostly quiet. They teased her, swore around her, and complained when she was scared. But together, they survived that first dark winter. Food was tight, but they managed. They just had to make it until the ship returned. It never did. Summer 1922 arrived. The ice broke up. The horizon opened. Every day they scanned the sea for a black dot of smoke, a mast, anything. Nothing. The ship Stefansson had promised never made it through the ice that year. On Wrangel Island, they waited day after day. No sound of an engine. No sign of help. Slowly, the truth sank in. They would have to face a second winter on the island, with less food, less ammunition, and no guarantee a ship would ever come. Hunting went from difficult to desperate. Sometimes the animals simply weren't there. Arguments grew sharper. Everyone felt the edge of fear. They now had only 2 options: stay and risk starving where they were, or try something even more dangerous. In January 1923, the sea ice was finally thick. The men made a brutal decision. 3 of them would try to walk south over frozen ocean, reach Siberia or another settlement, find help, send a rescue ship back for whoever was left. They took the best tent, sleds, dogs, food, and a rifle. Knight stayed behind. He was already getting sick and too weak for a long ice journey. Ada stayed too. She had no training for such a trek, and someone had to care for Knight. Imagine the scene: minus temperatures, a white horizon, and 3 small figures walking out on the sea ice that could crack open beneath them at any time. On January 28th, they disappeared into the distance. Ada watched until they were swallowed by the glare. In her diary, she later wrote that she never expected to see them again. She was right. No one ever did. Now, there were only 2 people left in camp, and one of them was slowly dying. Knight's health collapsed over the next weeks. His joints ached. His gums bled. He could barely stand. Years of harsh expeditions had already damaged his body. This finished it. Suddenly, Ada's job changed. She was no longer just cooking and sewing. She was now nurse caretaker and, soon, the only hunter. She melted snow for his water and fed him when he was too weak to lift a spoon. She cleaned his sores, rubbed his swollen legs, and turned him in his sleeping bag when he couldn't move. Outside, the traps and hunting were now her responsibility too. She was terrified of rifles. At first, she barely dared to touch one. In her broken English, she wrote, "I am not hunter. I don't know how to help myself." But if she didn't learn, they would both die. So she forced herself. She practiced with the gun. She walked alone to check fox traps. Step by step, the helpless cook started turning herself into a survivor. By June 1923, night was near the end. Ada wrote, "I try my best to take good care of him, but I can't do any more. Only wait to die." On June 22nd, exactly 2 years after they had first landed, Knight took his last breath inside the tent. Ada was now completely, officially alone. From then on, there were only two things left on that island: Ada and death. She dragged Knight's body outside and covered it as best she could. Then she walked back into the silent camp. From that moment until her rescue, Ada Blackjack was the only living human on Wrangel Island. Her world shrank to a worn tent, a stove, a rifle, a few traps, and the endless white. But she refused to just sit and wait for the end. She reinforced the tent with driftwood and extra canvas, and built a rough platform to keep food away from animals. She checked and reset the traps, skinned foxes, dried meat when she could, and watched the shore ice for seals, taking careful shots at breathing holes. One day, she heard heavy footsteps outside. A polar bear was moving toward the camp. Curious and hungry, the shadow passed the tent. She could hear it breathing. Ada picked up the rifle. Her hands were shaking. There was nobody else to stand between her and that animal. She aimed, fired once. Silence. The bear went down. The woman who had arrived afraid to touch a gun had just killed a polar bear alone. Every day was like this: fear, work, and survival. She melted snow, cooked what little she had, fixed clothing, and tried not to think too far ahead. She could have tried to escape over the sea ice like the men, but she knew that was almost certain death. So she made the harder, smarter choice. Stay alive where she was, one day at a time, and keep watching the horizon for a ship that might never come. Far away. In 1923, Stephenson's people finally sent a rescue mission. In August, a small ship fought its way through the ice toward Wrangel Island. The men on board expected the worst: an empty camp or a row of graves. Instead, they saw smoke, a tent still standing, footprints in the snow. A small, thin woman in homemade furs stepped out to meet them. Calm, still alive, it was Ada Blackjack. She had spent nearly 2 years on Wrangel Island. She had nursed a dying man until the end. She had hunted, trapped, and fought off bears. Of everyone who thought she was just a cook, she was the only one who came home alive. Back in Nome, Ada did not become rich or famous. She had to fight for the wages she was owed, while others sold her story as if they were the heroes. Only later, when her diary and the full records came out, did the truth spread. Ada had been the real survivor of Wrangel Island. She got Bennett back from the children's home. Tragically, he later died of tuberculosis. Ada lived a quiet life, working as a seamstress and housekeeper, rarely talking about the island that had almost killed her. The hero isn't always the one planting flags or giving speeches. Sometimes a hero is a poor, scared mother who wakes up every day, alone in the worst place on earth, and decides to fight for one more day. If Ada's story made you rethink what real courage and survival look like this video so more people can find it. And for more true survival stories, from frozen islands to deserts, oceans, and mountains, subscribe to the channel.